My name is Celeste Monroe. I'm 33, and I live in Seattle with my two kids, Olivia, 7, and Ethan, 4. If you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family, then you already know a part of my story. Before I go on, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this channel. Your support helps me keep telling the truth about what really happens behind the closed doors of perfect families. Every December, I used to believe in magic. When I was little, Christmas at my parents' house in Bellevue was a spectacle. Dad put on a red velvet suit and passed out candy canes to every child on our block. Mom strung lights across every corner of the living room, humming carols while the scent of cinnamon and cloves filled the air. My sister, Vanessa, and I would sit cross-legged by the fireplace, whispering guesses about the gifts under the tree. Those nights, the world felt safe and warm, like nothing could touch us. But childhood memories can be deceiving. They get polished by time, edited by longing. The truth is, somewhere along the line, that warmth cooled into something brittle. And this year, as I steered my old Honda toward Bellevue with Olivia and Ethan buckled in the back, I could already feel the weight of it pressing down on my chest. "Mommy, do you think Grandpa will do the Santa voice again?" Olivia asked, her voice high with hope. She clutched the doll she'd been carrying everywhere lately, stroking its tangled blonde hair. Ethan chimed in from his booster seat. "And the cookies, Mommy? Grandma's cookies with the red sprinkles?" Their questions stabbed at me in a way they couldn't understand. I forced a smile into my voice. "Maybe, sweetheart. We'll see when we get there." What I didn't tell them was that we hadn't been truly welcome in that house for more than a year. Invitations had turned into excuses. Too many people, not enough space, maybe next time. Yet part of me clung to the hope that this Christmas would be different, that my children might glimpse the magic I once knew. Traffic slowed as we crossed the bridge over Lake Washington. The water below looked steel gray in the fading light, rippled by the cold wind. I caught my own reflection in the rearview mirror. Tired eyes, makeup smudged from a long day at work, but determined. I wasn't driving to beg for approval. I was driving because my kids deserved the chance to feel included, even if it broke me a little more. Bellevue's quiet streets were lined with twinkling lights and inflatable Santas. As I turned onto my parents' block, Olivia pressed her face to the window. "Look, Mommy! Grandpa's house is glowing!" And it was. The Monroe home blazed with light, wreaths on every window, the kind of picture that would have made a Christmas card. I slowed the car, my heart hammering. The laughter drifting from inside carried through the frosted glass as we pulled into the driveway. I cut the engine and sat still for a beat, fingers gripping the steering wheel. This is it, I thought, the past colliding with the present. Olivia tugged at my sleeve. "Mommy, we're here. Can we go in now?" I took a long breath, nodded, and reached for the bag of gifts. The cold bit at our faces as we stepped onto the path toward the front door, the glow of the lights both welcoming and cruel. I raised my hand to knock, telling myself that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. The cold stung my cheeks as I guided Olivia and Ethan up the steps. The gift bag felt heavier than it should have, my fingers numb against the paper handles. The glow spilling through the frosted glass was almost too perfect, like looking in on someone else's happiness. I knocked once, lightly, then harder. For a moment I thought no one would answer. Then the door creaked open, and my mother's face appeared in the gap. "Celeste," she said flatly, her holiday smile dissolving into something closer to irritation. "I didn't realize you were coming by tonight." Her words hit me harder than the winter wind. I pulled Olivia closer, keeping my voice calm. "Mom, we talked last week. You said dinner was at 6. Behind her, the living room blazed with lights. The tree towered in the corner, its branches weighed down with golden ornaments. Laughter rang out from the dining room, loud enough that Ethan tugged on my sleeve and whispered, "They already started." "Mommy, can we go in?" Olivia's voice was small but urgent, her eyes wide as she tried to peek around my mother's frame. My mother hesitated, then stepped aside just enough for us to slip inside. Warmth hit me, mixed with the scent of rosemary and cloves, but the welcome ended there. I froze, my breath catching as I took in the table. 8 places set with polished china. My father at the head, Vanessa at his right, David across from her, the twins bouncing in their seats, Margaret's own chair gleaming at the other end, and the 8th, Vanessa's mother-in-law, a woman I'd met maybe twice, smiling politely over her wine glass. Not a single seat left for me or my children. Olivia's hand tightened around mine. Ethan looked up at me, confused. I forced my lips into a smile that felt brittle. "Say hello to Grandma and Grandpa," I murmured. "Hi," Ethan chirped. The twins barely looked up, too busy tearing into shiny packages stacked beside their plates. "Is that for us?" Olivia asked hopefully, spotting the small wrapped boxes I had dropped off earlier in the week. They sat ignored on a side table, pushed against the wall like an afterthought. Vanessa's voice cut through the room, sweet on the surface but edged like glass. "Oh, those. We haven't had time to open them yet. Maybe tomorrow." Her eyes flicked to my children. "Tonight's just already full." The words sank like stones in my chest. I glanced at my father, silently begging him to intervene, but he just cleared his throat and adjusted his napkin. My mother busied herself with pouring wine. The only person who spoke up was David's mother. She frowned, looking around the table. "But where will Celeste and the kids sit? It's Christmas, isn't it?" Her question hung in the air, heavy, unanswered. Vanessa let out a light laugh, dismissive. "We'll figure something out later." Something in me snapped. I crouched down to Olivia and Ethan's level, brushing their hair back from their flushed cheeks. "Why don't we head home, okay? We'll make pancakes, with extra chocolate chips." Their eyes lit up despite the sting of rejection. Olivia nodded quickly, clinging to her brother's hand. I straightened, meeting my mother's gaze. She didn't meet mine. "Merry Christmas," I said quietly, though my voice trembled. Then I turned toward the door, pulling my children back out into the icy night. The warmth of the house closed behind us, muffling the laughter, leaving only the crunch of snow under our boots and the ache in my chest. The door had almost closed behind us when Vanessa's voice carried through the hall. "Wait a second," she called, sharp enough to slice through the clatter of silverware. "Don't rush off, Celeste. The kids should at least see their cousins open their presents." Olivia's hand froze in mine. Ethan looked back hopefully, his little boots leaving wet prints on the rug. Against my better judgment, I turned, coaxed by that fragile flicker of hope in their eyes. We stepped back into the living room. Vanessa was already leaning over the twins, who were shredding wrapping paper with wild glee. A pile of toys spread across the floor, remote control cars, glittering Lego sets, a stack of video games still in their plastic. My carefully wrapped boxes sat untouched on the side table, paper curling at the corners. Vanessa glanced at them and smirked. "Oh, right, Celeste brought something too." She raised her voice just enough for everyone to hear. "But let's save those for tomorrow. Tonight's special, and the boys don't need to share the spotlight." The room went quiet for half a second, long enough for my daughter's face to crumple. Olivia whispered, "But Mommy, we picked them out together." I crouched down, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "I know, sweetheart," I murmured. "They'll open them later." Vanessa's laugh was airy, deliberate. "Don't be so sensitive, Celeste. You know how kids are. They like things done a certain way." Her words landed like tiny knives, casual but cutting. My mother busied herself with the roast, my father cleared his throat again, and David poured more wine. Not one of them stepped in. The only person who dared to break the silence was David's mother. She shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "I don't understand," she said, looking straight at my parents. "Why wouldn't there be space at the table for Celeste and the children? It is Christmas, after all." No one answered. Vanessa gave a strained chuckle and waved her hand as if brushing away a fly. "Oh, don't make it a big deal. It's just logistics. Next year, maybe." Next year. Like this was a scheduling conflict, not an exile. Olivia clung to my coat sleeve, whispering, "Mommy, are we not family?" That question pierced me deeper than anything Vanessa could have said. My throat burned, but I forced myself to stand tall. I turned to my sister. "You could have told me not to come. Instead, you let my kids walk in here to see they weren't wanted." Vanessa's smile was pure sugar. "Don't twist it, Celeste. We love having you around. When it fits." "When it fits," I repeated, my voice breaking. I looked at my parents, hoping for a flicker of shame, but they both avoided my gaze. Ethan tugged at my hand. "Can we go home now?" His voice was barely a whisper, but it steadied me. "Yes, baby," I said. I straightened, heart hammering, and faced the table one last time. "Merry Christmas," I said, though it came out like an accusation. "I hope the food tastes better than this silence." No one replied. Vanessa shrugged, turning back to help her boys assemble their new toys. My father poured himself another drink. My mother fiddled with the salt shaker as if it were suddenly fascinating. I opened the door again, the cold rushing in. Olivia and Ethan followed, heads bowed. I didn't bother hiding the tears stinging my eyes this time. Outside, the air was sharp and merciless, but at least it was honest. As the door shut behind us, sealing in their laughter and shutting us out, I realized something vital. This wasn't just about being excluded. It was about being diminished in front of my children, about teaching them they didn't deserve a place at their own family's table. That was the humiliation I could never forgive. The night air wrapped around us like a punishment, sharp and raw. Snow crunched under our boots as we hurried down the path. Olivia's small fingers dug into my palm, Ethan stumbling to keep up, his little legs pumping fast. I wanted to scoop them both into my arms, shield them from everything, but my chest was too heavy to breathe, let alone carry anyone. "Mommy," Olivia whispered, her voice cracking in the cold. "Why didn't Grandpa ask us to stay? Did we do something wrong?" Her question shattered whatever thin shield I'd tried to put up. I bent down to meet her eyes, my breath visible between us. "You didn't do anything wrong, sweetheart. None of this is your fault." "But—" she hesitated, tears forming. "Then why don't they want us?" Beside her, Ethan's lip quivered. He tried to be brave, but his voice was small. "Are we not family?" The words sliced through me, deeper than anything Vanessa's smug grin or my parents' silence could inflict. My knees buckled, and I crouched in the snow right there beside the car, pulling both of them into my arms, their hats pressed against my cheeks, their bodies trembling. "You are family," I said fiercely, though my throat was closing. "You're my family, and I will never, ever let anyone make you feel less than that again." Their sobs softened against my coat. I kissed the tops of their heads, tasting salt and cold. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The girl who had once begged for her parents' approval, the woman who kept hoping for scraps of belonging, was gone. I helped them into the car, brushing snow off their boots before buckling their seatbelts. As I slid into the driver's seat, the glow of my parents' house still spilled across the lawn. Laughter drifted faintly through the walls. For the first time in my life, I didn't envy it. I pitied it. Because what they had in that house wasn't warmth. It was performance, routine, obligation. Ethan reached for my hand across the console. "Can we still have Christmas, Mommy?" I squeezed his fingers. "Of course we can. We'll make our own Christmas. Pancakes, cocoa, movies, anything you want." Olivia sniffled, her eyes hopeful again. "Even with extra chocolate chips?" I managed a laugh, though my eyes still burned. "Especially with extra chocolate chips." Their little smiles broke through the heaviness, and in the space between their fragile hope and my breaking heart, resolve took root. This was it, the moment I decided I would stop chasing people who chose not to see us. I started the engine. The headlights cut through the snow, carving a path away from Bellevue. As the house shrank behind us, a sense of release spread through me. Painful but strangely liberating, like tearing off a bandage that had been stuck for too long. On the drive back, Olivia hummed a carol under her breath, trying to fill the silence. Ethan fell asleep, his small hand still clutching mine. I glanced at them in the rearview mirror, my whole world buckled into 2 car seats. I whispered to myself, a promise only I could hear. We're done being the afterthought. We're done begging for room. The skyline of Seattle rose ahead, its lights scattered like jewels against the dark. I felt the weight of betrayal pressing down, but underneath it, something stronger stirred: determination. When I pulled into the apartment parking lot, I didn't feel defeated. I felt ready to start over, ready to show my children that being left out of someone else's table didn't mean we couldn't build our own. And that night, as I carried Ethan upstairs and watched Olivia bound ahead, I knew this Christmas was the last time we would ever stand outside in the cold, waiting for a door that was never meant to open for us. By the time I tucked Olivia and Ethan into bed that night, exhaustion had wrapped itself around me like a heavy blanket. I sat at the edge of Olivia's bed, smoothing her hair while she drifted off, still clutching the stuffed bunny she'd brought to Bellevue. Ethan's soft snores carried from across the room. Watching them sleep should have comforted me, but all I felt was a gnawing ache, the kind that comes from realizing tonight's rejection wasn't some isolated mishap. It was part of a pattern, a rot that had been spreading for years. I poured myself a glass of cheap Merlot in the kitchen and sank into a chair. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. That silence pressed me toward the truth I'd been avoiding. This wasn't just about logistics or space at a table. It went deeper. I thought back to the spring after my divorce, when the lawyer called me with the news that Grandma had left me her savings, $80,000. Not a fortune, but enough to give me a chance to breathe, to move forward. I could still remember the sour look on Vanessa's face when she found out. "Why you?" she'd asked, not even bothering to hide her resentment. "We're both her granddaughters. Why did she single you out?" I'd tried to explain. Grandma and I had been close, especially after I moved back from college. I'd stayed with her when she broke her hip, visited her every week. Vanessa rarely called, too wrapped up in her own life, but none of that mattered. From that day on, jealousy colored everything she said to me. And then there was Tyler, my ex-husband, the man who smiled sweetly in public and sliced me to ribbons in private. When the marriage finally collapsed, I expected my family to rally around me. Instead, they kept him close. I'll never forget the night I found out he'd been invited to Dad's retirement dinner. While I hadn't even gotten a text, Vanessa told me afterward, her tone dripping with condescension. "You know, Tyler just gets along so well with everyone. He's easy. You, on the other hand, you always bring drama." Drama. That was the word they used to dismiss every boundary I tried to set, every hurt I dared to name. They'd rather keep the charming ex-son-in-law and his smooth conversation than deal with the messy reality of their own daughter's pain. I swirled the wine in my glass, bitterness rising like bile. Tonight at that table, it all crystallized. It wasn't about space. It wasn't about noise, or the boys being overwhelmed, or any of the excuses they fed me. It was about control. It was about Vanessa's envy, my parents' favoritism, and their unwillingness to face the truth. I no longer fit the picture they wanted to show the world. The thought was both devastating and freeing. If I couldn't win their approval, then I didn't have to keep trying. I looked toward the kids' bedroom, where soft breathing filled the air. My resolve tightened. They deserved better than this half-love, this conditional acceptance. They deserved a mother who taught them how to stand tall, even when the people who should have held them up were the ones pulling them down. I raised my glass, whispering into the quiet, to new beginnings. And for the first time in years, the idea of letting go didn't feel like defeat. It felt like the start of something worth fighting for. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Olivia and Ethan giggling in the living room. They'd dragged the couch cushions to the floor and were bouncing on them like trampolines. The sight should have filled me with joy, but what I felt was sharper. An ache that pushed me to move, to change, to make sure their laughter never again echoed against a backdrop of rejection. I set a plate of chocolate chip pancakes in front of them, the promised feast from the night before. Ethan clapped. Olivia's eyes sparkled, and for a moment I could almost forget the chill from Bellevue. Almost. As I poured myself coffee, I made a silent vow. Enough of waiting for invitations that would never come. If my family couldn't make space for us, then I would build a life where we had all the space we needed. That Monday, I threw myself into work at the marketing agency. The office was small, tucked inside a refurbished brick building in downtown Seattle, but it pulsed with energy. While most of my coworkers counted down to the holidays, I stayed late, fine-tuning campaigns, reaching out to clients, pushing myself harder than I ever had. My boss, Mary Ann, noticed. One evening, as I hunched over a draft, she leaned on my desk. "Celeste, you've been on fire lately. Are you sure you're okay? Most people slow down this time of year." I looked up, tired but resolute. "I don't have the luxury of slowing down. Not right now." She studied me, then smiled. "Well, whatever your reason, it's working. Keep this up and we'll be talking about a promotion sooner rather than later." Her words lit something inside me. For the first time in months, I felt seen, not as a burden, not as an afterthought, but as someone who had value. At night, when the kids were asleep, I opened my laptop and worked freelance jobs, branding for a boutique in Portland, copy for a tech startup in San Francisco. The money trickled in at first, then grew into something steadier. Each deposit felt like proof that I wasn't powerless, that I could shape my own future. Still, it wasn't easy. Some nights I sat at the kitchen table, eyelids heavy, staring at numbers that didn't add up. Rent, daycare, groceries, it all felt impossible. But then I'd hear Ethan's sleepy voice calling, "Mommy?" or Olivia padding out to ask for water, and the exhaustion hardened into resolve. One evening, Olivia wandered into my little office corner, where I worked at a desk wedged between the fridge and the wall. She climbed into my lap, peering at the colorful mock-ups glowing on my screen. "Are you making pictures?" she asked. "In a way," I said, kissing the top of her head. "I'm helping people tell their stories." "Like you tell ours?" Her words caught me off guard. I hugged her tighter. Exactly like that. And in that moment, I understood. Rebuilding wasn't just about money or stability. It was about rewriting the narrative my family had tried to assign me. They saw me as fragile, dependent, lesser, but my children would grow up seeing something else. They'd see a mother who refused to break, who created joy even from ashes. By spring, my calendar was packed. Agency work by day, freelance by night. Weekends became moments of stolen rest, trips to the park, pancake breakfasts, movie marathons on the couch. It was exhausting, but also exhilarating. Each step forward was proof that we weren't standing still. I didn't know exactly where this road would lead, but I knew one thing for certain. I would never again let my kids feel small in a room where they deserved to belong. This was the foundation of our new life, brick by brick, word by word, client by client. And for the first time in years, the future didn't look like a closed door. It looked wide open. By late summer, the relentless months of double shifts and side projects had started to bear fruit. My savings account, once a thin lifeline, finally had some weight to it. I still remember the day my realtor, a kind woman named Diane, called to say she'd found something I needed to see. "It's in Capitol Hill," she said, her voice carrying a quiet excitement. "A Victorian built in the 1890s. 4 bedrooms, wraparound porch, original woodwork. It's special." I almost laughed. Me? A single mom with 2 kids and a mountain of responsibility? But something in her voice made me agree to meet her that Saturday. When we pulled up to the house, Olivia gasped so loudly Ethan giggled. "It looks like a dollhouse," she shouted, her face pressed to the window. The porch wrapped around like welcoming arms. The stained glass windows glimmered in the late August sun. I stepped onto the creaking steps and felt an unexpected lump rise in my throat. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar. The foyer opened into a grand staircase, its banisters smooth with age. The dining room had tall windows and space for a table that could seat 12, a deliberate detail I didn't miss. My chest tightened, imagining the emptiness of Bellevue's table compared to the warmth this room could hold. Ethan ran ahead into the kitchen, his small sneakers squeaking. "Mommy, it's huge! We can bake cookies here!" Diane smiled, watching the kids dart through the rooms. "I don't usually say this, but I think this house is waiting for you." That night, after I tucked the kids into bed at the apartment, I sat at the kitchen table with a calculator and trembling hands. The numbers were daunting, but for the first time they weren't impossible. I thought about every late-night project, every client email answered at midnight, every tear I'd swallowed since Bellevue. Buying this house wasn't reckless. It was reclaiming something that had been stolen from me, belonging. A month later, I signed the papers. The keys felt heavy in my palm, solid proof that my life was no longer dictated by who did or didn't invite me to a table. When I told my parents, the reaction was almost predictable. My mother pursed her lips. "Isn't that a bit ambitious for someone in your situation?" My father frowned. "That's a lot to manage, Celeste. Are you sure you can keep up?" And Vanessa? She didn't even pretend. A Victorian in Capitol Hill? "Please, don't come crying to us when you can't afford the upkeep." I listened, but their doubt only made the keys in my pocket feel heavier, more real. I didn't need their approval anymore. Moving day was chaos. Boxes stacked like walls, kids darting between rooms, neighbors waving as the truck unloaded. That first night, we ate pizza cross-legged on the hardwood floor of the dining room, the chandelier casting a soft glow overhead. Olivia leaned against me, Ethan curled into my lap, and for once the emptiness around us didn't feel lonely. It felt like possibility. I whispered into the quiet, "This is our home now. No one can take it away." And in the reflection of those tall windows, I almost believed I saw a stronger version of myself staring back. By November, the house no longer felt like a shell. Olivia's room glowed soft pink, Ethan's walls were covered with painted planets and glow-in-the-dark stars. My little office overlooked the street, stacks of projects piled neatly beside a second-hand desk. The dining room, though, was my pride, tall windows draped with warm curtains, an antique oak table polished until it gleamed. It wasn't lost on me that it could seat 12. One rainy evening, as I hung garlands along the staircase, Olivia came bounding down, clutching a glitter-covered drawing. "Mommy, can we have Christmas here this year? Not at Grandma's?" The question landed heavy and light all at once. Heavy, because I remembered the sting of Bellevue. Light, because for the first time, we had a place that felt worthy of celebration. I crouched to meet her eyes. "What would you think if we made our own tradition? Invited people who love us, people who actually want to be with us?" Her face lit up, brighter than the string of lights in my hands. "Like Mrs. Chen? And Auntie Lisa?" "Yes," I said, hugging her. "Exactly like that." That night, I sat at the dining table with a notebook. I wrote a guest list. Lisa and her family, driving up from Portland. Mrs. Chen, who had become like a grandmother to the kids. Michael and James, who had carried me through the darkest parts of my divorce. Sophie, my yoga instructor turned confidant. 10 people, maybe more. People who saw me, not as an obligation, but as Celeste. Still, I wanted this dinner to be more than a gathering. I wanted it to feel unforgettable, undeniable, a declaration that we weren't leftovers. That's when I thought of him. Chef Anthony Delgado, head chef at Alder and Vine, Seattle's most exclusive restaurant. Vanessa had bragged for weeks about the night David surprised her with dinner there. She'd called it life-changing. The irony wasn't lost on me. The next morning, nerves humming, I dialed the restaurant. "Chef Delgado's private events are fully booked for December," his assistant said politely. I hesitated, then drew in a breath. "I understand, but I'm willing to pay more. Whatever it takes. This dinner isn't just a dinner, it's—" I stopped myself before saying too much. "It matters." There was silence, then a measured response. "Let me check with Chef and call you back." An hour later, my phone rang. "Ms. Monroe? Chef Delgado said yes. He'll personally design a menu and bring his staff. How many guests should we plan for?" I stared at my gleaming oak table, imagining it filled with people I loved. My voice shook, but not from doubt. 10, I said. "And please, don't hold back. I want this to be extraordinary." When I hung up, my chest filled with something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Not the loud, showy kind Vanessa paraded, but the quiet strength of taking back control. Over the next weeks, I decorated like my mother once had, but with my own touch. Professional lights traced the porch. A 12-foot tree stood proud in the living room, ornaments glinting like jewels. Candles lined the banister, filling the house with soft golden light. One night, as we unpacked a box of ornaments, Ethan asked, "Mommy, is Santa coming here this year?" I kissed his forehead. "Santa will always find us, sweetheart, but this year, we're making sure Christmas finds us too." Olivia twirled in the glow of the tree. "Can we take pictures, like the ones Auntie Vanessa always posts?" I smiled, thinking of what those pictures would mean, not just for us, but for anyone who doubted me. "Oh yes, baby, we'll take pictures. And when we do, we'll show the world exactly what family looks like." For the first time, the thought of Christmas didn't carry dread. It carried promise. This wasn't revenge, not really. It was reclamation, and I was ready. The decorations weren't even finished when my phone lit up with Vanessa's name. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hey, sis," she said, sugarcoating her voice. "So, what are you and the kids doing for Christmas this year?" I wrapped the string of lights tighter around the banister, letting her wait. "We're hosting people here at the house." "Oh?" she replied too quickly. "Anyone I know?" "Just some friends." I kept my tone light, careful not to give her more than I wanted. A pause stretched between us, filled with static and unspoken questions. Then her voice dipped, casual in a way that wasn't casual at all. "Well, maybe we could stop by after dinner at Mom and Dad's. The boys would love to see Olivia and Ethan." I laughed under my breath, the sound sharp. "I don't think that's going to work, Vanessa. We'll be busy with our guests." Her mask slipped for just a second. "Guests? Like a party?" "Something like that." I wound the lights tighter, anchoring them with a knot. "It's going to be a full evening." There was a beat of silence before she tried again. "You know, Mom still heard about last year. She swears it was just a mix-up. Too many people, not enough room. You're always welcome at their table." The words stung, not because I believed them, but because I'd heard them before. I pressed my thumb into the railing, grounding myself. "Funny, I don't remember feeling welcome. Not then, not now." Vanessa sighed, feigning exasperation. "You really hold on to things, don't you? Can't we just move past it?" I closed my eyes, seeing Olivia's face that night in Bellevue, the way her voice trembled. "Are we not family?" That wasn't something you just moved past. "No, Vanessa," I said quietly but firmly. "We can't." Before she could reply, I ended the call. My hands were shaking, but my chest felt lighter. From the living room, Olivia called, "Mommy, can we hang the angel on top now?" I forced a smile into my voice. "Yes, baby. Let's do it together." As I lifted her onto my shoulders, guiding her tiny hands to place the angel, I thought about the call. Vanessa wasn't really interested in visiting. She was fishing, sensing that for the first time, I wasn't waiting for her approval. And that terrified her. By Christmas afternoon, the house was glowing from the inside out. Chef Delgado's team bustled in the kitchen, aromas of rosemary, garlic, and truffle filling every corner. My guests mingled in the living room, glasses of wine in hand, children laughing as they darted between the tree and the staircase. I stepped back for a moment, just to take it all in. The Victorian felt alive, not just with decorations, but with warmth, real warmth. The kind that came from people choosing to be here. Olivia sat cross-legged on the rug, teaching Lisa's daughters how to fold paper snowflakes, while Ethan giggled at Michael's card tricks. Mrs. Chen arrived with her famous almond cookies, immediately embraced like family. It was everything I had dreamed of, and more. Dinner was served just as the sun slipped behind the Seattle skyline. Chef Delgado himself carried in the first course, his presence commanding attention. Even the children sat a little straighter as he explained the dishes: herb-crusted lamb, wild mushroom risotto, duck with cherry reduction. I caught Olivia's awed whisper, "It's like a fairy tale." We raised our glasses in a toast, laughter bubbling around the table. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like an outsider looking in. I felt at the center of something whole. And then the knock came. I froze, glass in hand. The room hushed, forks suspended mid-air. Another knock, louder this time. "I'll get it," I said quickly, pushing back my chair. My pulse raced even before I opened the door. There they were, Vanessa, David, and their twins, standing on my porch like they owned the night. Behind them, the glow of my lights reflected in their eyes, astonishment and something sharper, envy. "Merry Christmas," Vanessa said too brightly, clutching a casserole dish wrapped in foil. "We thought we'd stop by after all, brought some leftovers." For a second I couldn't speak. My gaze flicked to the dish, the forced smiles on their faces. I almost laughed at the irony. They came expecting to find me and the kids huddled around scraps, and instead they had walked into something grander than their imaginations allowed. Behind me, the sound of clinking glasses and cheerful chatter spilled into the hall. Chef Delgado appeared from the kitchen, greeting a guest with his signature warmth. Vanessa's eyes widened, recognition dawning instantly. "Is that—" Her voice faltered. You have Delgado here?" I folded my arms. "Yes, he's cooking for us tonight." Her composure cracked. "How did you even— He doesn't take private events. We tried last year for David's birthday and they told us—" "Guess he didn't want to," I interrupted smoothly. "But he wanted to be here." The twins tugged at Vanessa's sleeves, whining about the smell of food. David tried to recover, pasting on his polite smile. "Well, maybe we could join you? There's always room for family, right?" His words nearly choked me with their hypocrisy. I thought of Olivia's tearful question that night in Bellevue. "Are we not family?" I met Vanessa's eyes, steady and unflinching. "Funny you should say that, because last year I remember hearing there wasn't enough room for me, for my kids, for anyone who didn't fit your perfect picture." Her smile vanished. She opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. "This table is full. Every seat belongs to someone who chose to be here, who wanted us as much as we wanted them. That's what family means." Behind me, Michael appeared, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Everything all right?" I nodded. "Yes, we were just saying goodbye." The message landed. Vanessa's cheeks flushed, a mix of embarrassment and fury. She looked past me into the house one last time, at the glowing tree, the laughter, the guests who had already turned back to their meals, unconcerned with her presence. I stepped forward, easing the door closed between us. "Merry Christmas, Vanessa," I said softly. "I hope you find the room you're always talking about." The latch clicked, muffling their voices. I stood there for a beat, my chest pounding, then turned back to the dining room. Olivia looked at me from her seat, eyes wide, silently asking if everything was okay. I smiled, steadier now. "Everything's perfect," I told her, and meant it. As I raised my glass again, laughter swelling around me, I realized the knock on the door hadn't interrupted Christmas. It had confirmed it. The family I needed was already here. I thought closing the door would be the end of it. But 10 minutes later, just as dessert was being served, the bell rang again. Before I could move, Vanessa pushed her way in, her heels clacking on the hardwood as if she had every right. David followed, carrying the twins, who looked bored and sulky. The casserole dish sat abandoned on my porch. The dining room fell into stunned silence. Candles flickered, spoons paused midair. Chef Delgado himself stood by the sideboard, eyebrows raised, but polite enough not to interfere. "Vanessa," I said tightly, stepping into her path. "What are you doing?" She didn't lower her voice. "I can't believe you, Celeste. Hiring Delgado? Throwing this spectacle just to spite us?" A hot flush crept up my neck, but I stayed rooted. "This isn't about you. It's about giving my children a Christmas where they feel wanted." Her laugh was brittle. "Wanted? Or flaunted? You invited half of Seattle to rub in our faces that you don't need us anymore." I glanced at my guests, Lisa's daughters staring wide-eyed, Mrs. Chen clutching her teacup, Michael and James exchanging uneasy glances. The last thing I wanted was a scene. But the truth was already spilling into the open, and I was done swallowing it. "You excluded me first," I said, my voice shaking but growing stronger with each word. "Every birthday dinner, every holiday, every excuse about not enough room. My kids stood on your porch and heard you say it. You left us out." Vanessa's face twisted. "It wasn't like that." "Yes, it was," I cut in. And tonight you're upset because for once, you're the one standing outside. Now you know how it feels." A murmur rippled through the room. Sophie shifted in her chair, her eyes fierce with quiet support. David cleared his throat, trying to smooth things over. "Let's not do this in front of everyone. We came because we thought— You came because you didn't like the idea of me being happy without you," I snapped. "And you can't stand that these people," I gestured around the table, "showed up willingly, without guilt, without conditions. That's family, Vanessa, not the blood ties you use as a leash." Her eyes darted to Chef Delgado, who had remained silent until now. He stepped forward calmly, folding his arms. "For what it's worth, Ms. Monroe didn't hire me to make a statement. She hired me to create a memory for her children, and I accepted because I respect her. That's all." The weight of his words dropped into the silence like a stone. Vanessa's mouth opened, then shut. Even the twins squirmed uncomfortably. Lisa spoke next, her voice warm but edged. "Celeste doesn't have to justify her joy. She built this life. She earned this table." The support steadied me. I met Vanessa's glare head-on. "You accused me of revenge, but this isn't revenge. Revenge would mean trying to hurt you. I'm just done letting you hurt me." For the first time, Vanessa faltered. Her voice cracked. "You've changed." I nodded. "Yes, and thank God I did." The room held its breath. Vanessa shifted, realizing she had lost whatever audience she thought she'd command. David tugged at her arm, murmuring something about leaving. She resisted for a beat, then finally spun on her heel, her voice sharp. "Don't expect us to come back begging." I let out a long breath. "I don't." The front door slammed, rattling the stained glass windows. The room exhaled collectively, conversation starting to hum again as the tension eased. Olivia slid off her chair and wrapped her arms around my waist. "Mommy," she whispered, "you were really brave." I hugged her close, my voice thick. "No, sweetheart, I just told the truth." When I looked back at the table, my friends were smiling, some soft, some triumphant, but all of them present. The confrontation hadn't ruined the evening. If anything, it had underlined what I already knew. I didn't need to beg for a seat anymore. I had built my own table, and every chair was filled with people who wanted me there. I raised my glass again, my hand steady. "To chosen family," I said. And this time the toast rang louder, stronger, unshakable. The days after Christmas were quieter than I expected. The tree still glowed in the corner, needles beginning to crisp, and the children spent their mornings sprawled on the rug with new puzzles and books. For a brief moment, life felt settled, but outside our house, the ripple from that night was already moving. It started with Mrs. Chen. She attended her book club on the 27th, and apparently she couldn't resist sharing every detail. By the next morning, Lisa texted me a screenshot of a neighborhood forum post. "Did you hear about the Monroe dinner? Delgado himself cooked. Meanwhile, the Petersons left their own daughter and grandkids out in the cold last year. Shameful." I stared at the words until my vision blurred. Not out of shame, but disbelief that the truth was finally being spoken aloud, not by me, but by others. That same afternoon, my phone buzzed again. It was Michael. "You're trending, Celeste," he said, half amused, half serious. "Two of my clients were at the party, and they can't stop talking about it. Word spreads fast on Capitol Hill." I laughed, though my chest tightened. "Great. Just what I need. Our family drama as dinner conversation for the whole neighborhood." "Not drama," he corrected gently. "Perspective. People are realizing who you are and who they are." The fallout reached Vanessa sooner than I imagined. I heard about it first from Ethan's teacher, who bumped into me at the grocery store. She leaned in, voice low. "I saw your sister at Alder and Vine last night. Tried to book a table, but apparently Chef Delgado refused her outright. Said, and I quote, 'We don't serve those who disrespect our staff or our guests.' She stormed out." I almost dropped the basket in my hands. The image of Vanessa, red-faced and sputtering in the middle of the city's most exclusive restaurant, was both surreal and satisfying. 2 days later, my mother called. Her voice trembled, more brittle than I'd ever heard. Celeste, people are talking. The Hendersons canceled bridge night. The Millers, your father's golfing partners, they asked him point blank why we treat you the way we do. He couldn't answer. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone. Maybe you should have thought about that before leaving us on a porch. Her breath caught, as if I'd struck her. We didn't mean— Yes, you did, I interrupted, my tone firm but calm. You meant every word when you said there wasn't enough room. Now the world sees it for what it was. She started crying softly. I didn't hang up, but I didn't console her either. For years, I'd begged for crumbs of affection. I wasn't hungry anymore. That evening, Lisa came over with a bottle of wine. We sat by the fireplace while the kids played upstairs. She raised her glass toward me. You know, this isn't just about them losing face. It's about you reclaiming yours. Her words sank in. For so long, I thought dignity came from forgiveness, from making myself small to fit their table. But it turned out dignity came from standing tall, from building my own table and letting the world witness it. Vanessa's anger, my parents' shame, it wasn't revenge. It was consequence. Actions echo, and for once the echoes weren't crushing me. They were clearing space. I tucked a blanket around my shoulders and let myself exhale fully, the way you do when a storm finally passes. The house creaked softly, not empty, but alive. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for their approval or their rejection. I was simply living. And the world, it seemed, had finally noticed. It came late on a Thursday night, when the house was finally quiet. Olivia had fallen asleep with a book on her chest, Ethan curled up with his stuffed bear. I had just settled into bed when my phone buzzed, Vanessa's name lighting the screen. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but something in me wanted to hear what excuse she'd make this time. I swiped to answer. You humiliated me, she spat before I could say hello. Her voice was sharp, raw with fury. Do you have any idea what you've done? People are talking. My phone hasn't stopped buzzing since Christmas. I sat up, pressing the phone tighter to my ear. I didn't humiliate you, Vanessa. You did that to yourself. Don't twist this, she snapped. You paraded Delgado around like some trophy just to prove a point. Do you think you look strong? You look desperate. Her words might have gutted me once, but not now. I took a slow breath. I didn't hire him for you. I hired him for my kids, for me, for the life I'm building. If you feel exposed, that's on you. There was a pause, then a bitter laugh. You're nothing without this act, Celeste. Without us, without family, you're just alone. I felt the sting but pushed it down. Alone? My voice steadied. Look around you, Vanessa. You're the one scrambling, calling me in the middle of the night because people finally see the truth. You've built your life on appearances. Mine is built on love, the kind you can't fake. Her breathing quickened. I pictured her pacing her perfect Bellevue kitchen, hair frizzed from stress, glass of wine trembling in her hand. You think you've won? She hissed. This isn't over. I won't let you make me the villain. I closed my eyes, exhaustion washing over me. You don't need me to make you the villain, Vanessa. You do that every time you choose cruelty over kindness. For once, she had no comeback. The silence stretched, her anger crackling through the line but powerless now. Finally, she exhaled sharply and hung up. I stared at the ceiling in the dark, phone still in my hand. My chest thudded with a mix of adrenaline and relief. Vanessa's rage was proof of something I hadn't dared to believe until now. She wasn't in control anymore. And neither was I. For the first time, I was simply free. The angry call had barely faded from memory when the next one came, this time from my mother. It was early evening, the kids finishing homework at the dining table, the house quiet except for the scratching of pencils. Her name flashed on the screen, and a familiar heaviness settled in my chest. I answered anyway. Celeste, she began, her voice softer than I'd heard in years, almost trembling. I need to talk to you. I braced myself. I'm listening. There was a pause, filled with her uneven breathing. Your sister is... She's falling apart. People whisper about her at church, at the club. David's business partners pulled out of a deal. They don't want their names tied to scandal. And your father? He says he can't even walk into the golf course without someone asking about you. I leaned against the counter, arms folded tight. And now you're calling because it's embarrassing? Her voice cracked. No, I'm calling because I see now. We were wrong. I was wrong. The words hung in the air, heavy and unfamiliar. My mother had never admitted fault in her life, not once. I wanted to believe her, to let those words wash away years of neglect, but the memory of Olivia shivering on that porch wouldn't let me. I swallowed hard. It took public shame for you to realize your daughter mattered? I didn't mean, she started, then stopped herself. Celeste, I don't want to lose you, or the children. We miss them. I miss them. Ethan glanced up from his math sheet, sensing my tension. I forced a small smile, mouthing it's okay before turning away. You had years, I said quietly. Years to include us, to love us without conditions. And every time you chose Vanessa's comfort over my children's dignity. Now you're here because the neighborhood sees what I lived with all along. On the other end, I heard her sob, muffled but real. I don't know how to fix this. A lump rose in my throat, not from pity, but from finality. Maybe you can't. Silence pressed between us, thick and unyielding. For a moment, I almost softened, almost offered her the forgiveness I'd begged for so many Christmases ago. But then Olivia's laughter drifted from the living room, mingling with Ethan's playful protests, and clarity returned. I'm not shutting the door forever, I said at last, steady. But if you want to be in our lives, it has to be because you choose love, not appearances. No more excuses, no more half invitations. And if you can't do that, then you've already lost us. Her breath hitched, but she didn't argue. For once, she had nothing left to defend herself with. I'll think about it, she whispered, before the line went dead. I stood there, phone still warm in my hand, a strange calm spreading through me. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't vengeance. It was release. For the first time, her regret belonged to her, and not to me. The first week of January arrived with crisp air and pale winter sun spilling through the Victorians' tall windows. The house had settled into its rhythm, kids rushing through the morning routine, laughter bouncing off the walls, the hum of real life. One morning, as I packed Olivia's lunch, she looked up from tying her sneakers. Mommy, can we do Christmas here every year, with our people? Her question warmed me in a way I couldn't put into words. Yes, I said softly. Every year from now on. Ethan came running in, a Lego piece clutched in his fist. And can we invite Chef Delgado again? I laughed, ruffling his hair. We'll see, buddy. But even if we don't, the most important part is who's sitting around the table. Later that day, Lisa dropped by with coffee. We stood by the window, watching the kids play in the yard. She nudged me gently. You know, you've changed. You carry yourself different. Stronger. I smiled, realizing she was right. I think I finally stopped waiting for their approval. That wait's gone. We fell quiet, both of us watching Olivia and Ethan chase each other, their laughter ringing through the cold air. For once, I wasn't looking backward. I wasn't wondering what my family thought, or whether they'd ever understand. I was simply present. That night, as I tucked the kids into bed, Olivia wrapped her arms around my neck. I'm glad we're home, Mommy. Tears pricked my eyes, but they weren't from sadness. They were from knowing I had kept my promise. Me too, baby, I whispered. More than anything. When I finally sat down at the oak table, now quiet, I traced my fingers across the wood. It had seen laughter, confrontation, and truth. And it would see more. Birthdays, friendships, quiet dinners, maybe even peace one day. But whatever came, I knew this much. We were no longer standing on porches, waiting to be let in. We were already home. If you've listened to my story this far, maybe you've felt echoes of your own. For years, I thought family was something you had to earn, something you sacrificed pieces of yourself to keep. I bent, I apologized, I accepted scraps of love because I was too afraid to stand alone. But here's the truth I finally learned. Family isn't blood, it's choice. It's the people who show up without conditions, who cheer when you succeed, who stay when life isn't convenient. Once I understood that, I stopped begging for a seat at someone else's table and built one of my own. It wasn't easy. I had to face rejection, humiliation, and even my own fear of being unwanted. But on the other side of that pain, I found freedom. I found peace. And most importantly, I showed my children what it means to stand tall in your own worth. So if you're listening and you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, remember this. You are not defined by the people who shut the door on you. You are defined by the ones who open theirs. If this story touched you, please hit like, subscribe, share, and leave a comment. Tell me what family means to you, because maybe, like me, you'll realize you've had it all along.